brief, to the point, and non-duplicative, that would be terrific. I much gratitude for that. Thank you.
Let me introduce Mayor Pro Tem Lula Davis Holmes from City of Carson.
Good afternoon, and without being repetitious, as you said, I will be respecting your time. But just to say that I am a resident, an elected official, a mother, and a grandmother in the city of Carson, and I was alarmed to find that there was 35 sex offenders housed in one location in our city. I know Jessica's Law has addressed some of our concerns, but we would like to close that loophole that was left out, and that's the clustering of sex offenders in one location. Not only were there 35 at a hotel, but later we found that there was 12 sex offenders housed in the east end of our city in a fourplex, and right next door, as I visited that community, there was a little girl, age 4 years old, playing in the front yard, unbeknowing that there were 12 registered sex offenders living right next door to her. Her mother didn't know. I became alarmed because as a mother, a grandparent, elected official, I just could not sit by idly and know that we had sex offenders and our residents were living right next door to them, and we couldn't do anything about them because Jessica's Law and Megan's Law did not address the loophole, the clustering of sex offenders, that people are coming through and it's a business for them. It's a business. That little girl, I looked as though she was my granddaughter, and what would I do? And that's why I'm here, and that's why you see my colleagues here today, because we want that loophole closed. We don't want to disrespect the rights, the civil rights of these sex offenders. One young man told me, I've paid my dues. But the victim that was molested, they have to live with that forever. So without disrespecting their civil rights, we're just here supporting the bill and saying that there needs to be something done to close that loophole. Yes, they deserve a right to come back and be mainstream, but do they have the right to come into a community, 35 in one location, and put an entire community at unrest? So I'm asking you to support this bill, and I want to thank our Assemblyman for authoring this bill. We support it. We're here. You see 3 of our top elected officials here because we would like this loophole closed. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much. Next speaker, please.
Councilman Mike Gibson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Committee Chair, and to all the members that makes up this body. I'm Mike Gibson, Councilman in the City of Carson, and without being redundant, I concur with what my colleagues has indicated thus far regarding the support of Assembly Bill 505. I want to bring out just one bit of statistics. In California, where there are over 66,500 registered sex offenders, as of May 2009, there were 62 registered sex offenders living in Carson. 9 of them were convicted of rape, 5 were convicted of oral copulation, and more than 40 of them were convicted of sex acts to a person under the age of 14. This is alarming. As my colleagues has indicated, the clustering is something that we're very, very concerned about. We alerted our community regarding what was taking place. We want to also thank Assemblyman Warren Fortani for taking the courageous stand to close the loophole in this in Jessica's law. We believe that this is the right way to go, and we would certainly ask for this committee's support by a yes vote in getting this piece of legislation out of this committee today. So thank you very much for each of your time, and we just ask that you would just search your heart and your soul regarding this particular matter. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Committee, also we have with us the mayor of the City of Lakewood and also field operations commander for the Los Angeles County Sheriffs, Mr. Todd Rogers.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I am speaking to you today on behalf of the City of Lakewood and Sheriff Lee Baca and the LA County Sheriff's Department. We also join in urging your support of AB 505. We believe it is a modest change to state law, which already prohibits paroled and registered sex offenders from residing within a single-family dwelling with another registered sex offender unless they're legally related. This bill correctly extends that restriction to hotels, motels, and multifamily dwellings. We believe this provision will protect higher density neighborhoods from being unfairly impacted by the clustering of paroled sex offenders as compared to generally higher income neighborhoods primarily comprised of single-family homes. We also support the provision of the bill which limits the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation from placing paroled sex offenders in more than 10% of the rooms within a motel or hotel. This is a critical issue for many communities. For example, in 2008, while I was a commanding officer of the Carson Sheriff Station, we discovered those over 30 paroled sex offenders staying in our hotel, which had 62 rooms total. This situation required me to commit a tremendous amount of law enforcement resources to monitor the location and parolees therein, and it significantly eroded the sense of well-being within the surrounding community, which you've already heard about. Even worse, the unsuspecting guests who checked into the hotel while traveling and or to attend events at the nearby Home Depot Center soccer stadium and sports complex had no idea they were exposing their families to convicted sex offenders who comprised over 50% of the hotel's occupancy. That's not a situation in which any of us would want to place our families. The City of Lakewood and the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department thank Assemblymember Furtani for his willingness to take on this very difficult issue, and we respectfully request your support of this very important piece of legislation. And with that, I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are there any other speakers in support? All right, seeing none, are there any speakers or panel witnesses in opposition? Thank you, all of you, and we're going to let.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Deborah Carlton with the California Apartment Association. I'm actually not in opposition, nor am I supporting. I'm in that middle ground that you don't ever have here when it comes to testimony. So I want to, first of all, thank the author because it has agreed to work with us, but I want to bring to you just some of the very brief concerns that we have. And that is, as you know, rental property owners are limited in their use of the Megan's Law database. In other words, they can't use that database to identify registered sex offenders. So as one of the proponents pointed out, some are in the business perhaps of housing. There are many who are not in the business, however, get stuck in that unfortunate situation where they didn't know a registered sex offender lives in their buildings, and the tenants become very agitated and concerned. What we're asking the author to work with us on is to clarify actually within AB 505 the duty of sex offenders and the Department of Corrections to ensure compliance with the provisions of AB 505. And we also request that you provide some guidance to rental property owners when they learn that there are a number of registered sex offenders either together in a unit or in more than one unit within the building. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Valerie Small Navarro with the American Civil Liberties Union, respectfully in opposition. And probably in opposition because I think what we're seeing here is unintended consequences. I think the author's intentions are good, but I think what the practical effect of this bill of limiting housing 10% in a particular unit and the other provisions will be that people will end up homeless. And I think homelessness among this population is what we don't want to see. We want to see people in stable housing. We know in your analysis there's a long discussion about that stable housing is critical to prevent recidivism among this population and among other populations. So we want to make sure that we actually know where folks are. The other point I'd like to bring out is that we've all been voting on these initiatives on sex offenders, and they include a number of provisions, and I think we may be actually, in the name of protecting our society, which I think we all want to do, we may be just going a little too far at a certain point. So, for example, now all sex offenders have GPS monitoring. I mean, that's a pretty significant restriction. If you're homeless, you don't have electricity, and you're not going to be able to plug in your GPS. There's a restriction, you can't live 2,000 feet from a school or a park. That's another restriction. So we keep adding these restrictions, and I'm not sure that we're gaining what we're looking for. We're actually possibly taking a step in the wrong direction. So we urge a no vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Liberty Sanchez on behalf of the California Public Defenders Association. I think this is one of those really well-intentioned bills that is kind of counterintuitive in that the proposal would apparently make people feel safer, but wouldn't necessarily make them safer. Unfortunately, there's this perfect storm out there right now with Jessica's Law, with the economy, with rental owners' unwillingness, regardless of their access to Megan's Law, to rent to registered sex offenders. And it has forced these folks to live in these type of clustered situations. And that actually makes for easier tracking, easier access by parole agents. As the law enforcement official who testified in support recently just testified, there was additional law enforcement oversight based on this clustering. No mention was made of actual recidivism or activity in that area. And so, we recognize that there are concerns, community-based concerns about these types of clusters, and it makes sense to think if there's a large group of, of these individuals housed together that there might be an increase to recidivism, but there's no place for them to go, and we can't simply legislate further restrictions on their ability to be housed without thinking of where they should be able to go. So for those reasons, we're in opposition. Thank you.
Jim Lindberg for the Friends Committee on Legislation of California. I'll try not to be redundant, but we think that the clustering, at least in part, is driven by the ratcheting up of prohibitions on where this population can live. Further restrictions, as was mentioned, we think runs the risk of making this population homeless. We don't want a situation like that was publicized in Miami not too many years ago, where offenders were living under the bridge because corrections officials there could not place them. We think that provides a greater risk to public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers in opposition? All right, seeing none. Panelists,
Chairman,
any questions?
could I briefly respond?
Oh, sure. We're going to ask for questions, too, though, from the panel.
Or would you like questions first, or if I could respond?
Let's do the questions.
Okay.
I don't have any questions.
Oh, you don't have a question. All right. Go ahead,
I was
sir.
going to move the bill.
All right, fine.
The issue is, as everybody well knows, very difficult. We're talking about individual civil rights, but one of the undercurrent themes all day today with this committee has been local control. And what we're trying to do is strike a balance. The 10%, if it was increased to 20%, maybe we could deal with that as a compromise. But what's happening is the clustering isn't happening in every community. Everybody knows that. These sex offenders aren't being clustered in a hotel in Beverly Hills. They're not being clustered in the rich suburban communities. They're being clustered in the middle class, poor communities, wherever CDCR can find a place. And I appreciate, and we've been working on this for 2 years, trying to find a way to have a sensible bill that didn't have unintended consequences. Everybody knows, and it's going to be looked at in the courts in about 3 weeks, about the issue of the constitutionality of Jessica's Law. It's a very difficult issue that we're dealing with. But as we deal with it, one thing I know is that I'm elected by local officials and local constituencies. And their concerns and well-being is a concern of mine. And as I look at the broader policy issues, which we do and we should at the state level, I'm telling you, if we don't try to grab onto this and find some compromise and common sense way to deal with this, then the local ordinances are going to run amok as they already are. We're dealing with some things in some of our cities, in all of our districts, where the ordinances are pretty bizarre. I mean, these folks can't even go to anywhere where there's sand in some of these ordinances. So I'm trying to find a way to find a sensible compromise to deal with this issue. And you and I know, and I just reinforce this, that if this was spread out in all of the communities that everybody represents in the state, then maybe we could have a way of dealing with this. But it's not. The reason we use clustering is because that's what's happening. They're being clustered in certain communities, and several of my communities are being very negatively impacted. We have sensibilities and concerns for the civil rights of these individuals. The homeless problem we know is critical relative to these individuals. We also know that the vast majority of these individuals, we don't know where they are. We don't know where they are. We're talking about parolees right now and looking at CDCR as the body that's going to be responsible for enforcement, not the person that owns the apartment, not the person that owns the hotel or the motel. Difficult issue, difficult public policy, Gordian knot. I'm asking for your vote on this one.
Thank you, sir. Let me respond. Believe me, you are not the villain in this piece, and the testimony given by the residents and elected officials is very compelling. I would like to wave a magic wand and resolve this. So much of this is systemic. You're right on that, and you fighting for your local representatives is part of our job description. Absolutely. I can't support you on this one, not because I think it's wrong-headed or comes from a mean place or not even a humane place, but I really do think that we have to look at a bigger picture here, come up with different kinds of solutions. I know myself, I feel the courts, CDCR needs to have some options to tailor for individual communities. You're right, there is a class issue here. I don't know if you know Pacific Heights in San Francisco. You can bet your bottom dollar that there would not be any clustering there that we know of or anyone knows of. And that is an injustice. But again, I do think that there would be unintended consequences. And I know you've wrestled with this. It is frankly a moral dilemma. But I can't support this today. But I think with public safety, we're going to be hearing a lot of bills like this, people asking for help, people asking for relief. And so, I'd like to think on it with the staff of public safety and some other experts around this and maybe come up with solutions that are more wraparound. Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to second the motion. I do have some of the same concerns the Apartment Association brought up when we're prohibited, as an apartment owner myself, to checking out the background, discriminating who we rent to, at the same time are going to be held responsible or maybe not responsible. We have to hold someone responsible, and I think it's better worded, and I'll allow you to work with the association of the interest to make sure the duty falls upon the government and not upon the private owners of these properties who may have no idea who's in their building because we're prohibited from finding that out. And it does come up to be a problem. I do respect the fact that the local government wants to have some kind of structure, and then when we fail to have that structure given here, you have some of the things like unintended consequences, like the medical marijuana is sprouting out, the dispensaries all over the place because we did not have a structure how to deal with that locally. So this is a start only, I believe. It's not a conclusion of the problem, and I definitely encourage you to work with our representatives from the apartment associations and try to figure out how we can both give the freedom for their people who serve their time to move on with their life and move in their locations, at the same time not be a deposit where we put people at from CDCR. So good luck with that.
Thank you, Mr. Hahn.
Thank you. Any other comments? Ms. Skinner?
I'm going to stay off the bill today. I totally understand what you're trying to accomplish. The conflict for me is that the materials I've received would indicate that local governments do have this authority now, and I am always hesitant to put into statute something that they may already have the authority for, in which, again, even though I totally respect that you have done good due diligence to try to examine the different unintended consequences, I will be staying off of it.
Makes sense.
Mr. Chair, if I could make, thank you. I'll be supporting the bill today, and the reason for, if you look at the overarching broad state policy, I should vote no. I mean, when you look at it that way, I should vote no on this, looking at the greater good of trying to solve a particular problem. But as someone who comes from local government and watching over the years the burden that the state has placed through unintended consequences of Jessica's Law and other situations, so the unintended consequences have affected the quality of life of local communities. as I think they have in the city of Carson. And I think that if we continue to allow or go along that same path, we will continue to affect the quality of life of those local communities that don't really have the resources, don't have the economic well-being to solve those problems on their own. And so I think we have to take a stand and not necessarily create a problem, but at least highlight the fact that there is a problem and that someone needs to deal with it without having to burden and place that responsibility on local governments. So
Thank you, Mr.
I'll be supporting.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments from my well-spoken committee members? All right, then a roll call, please.
Amiano?
No.
Amiano, no. Hagman? Hagman, aye. Furtani?
Aye.
Furtani, aye. Gilmore? Gilmore, aye. Hill?
Aye.
Hill, aye. Huffman? Skinner? Skinner not voting. Bill's out.
Bill is out.
Thank you very much, members.
All right, our next bill, Mr. Solario.
Mr. Solario. Gotta send a message. Somehow, somewhere.
Are you ready for me, Mr. Chair? Thank you, Chairman and members. I'm not going to read my statement. I would tell you that we have a choice here in California. We can decide to, throw the prisoners in and throw away the key and lock them up, or we could try to rehabilitate and educate those inmates. The bill before you is to really ascertain what answer we want in California. I would suggest that we should make every effort to educate and rehabilitate our inmates. And the reason, and then the way to do that is by not eliminating in its entirety all education and vocational programs in our prisons. That's essentially what this governor is doing to our rehabilitation and education programs. We think that there should be always a meaningful amount of educational programming for our inmates. In fact, it's the law. We really should be taking inmates up to a 9th grade reading level by the time they leave. That is the law. We're not really doing that. We're seeing slowly, hundreds and hundreds of teachers being fired by their jobs. You have inmates wanting to learn, and we also not long ago enacted credits where we give inmates extra time that they can leave in advance of their original date if they take classes. Well, we're eliminating the classes and we're putting them in larger classes. That's not the way to go. The governor in the current budget wants to eliminate in its entirety all rehabilitation education programs. That is wrong. I have here with me today some witnesses that could speak to the reasons why we need to have educational and rehabilitation programs in our prisons.
Thank you. My name is Cindy Fonseca, and I'm the chair of the bargaining unit that represents all the teachers and vocational instructors that work in the prisons. And we are here today in support of the bill, and we want to thank Assemblymember Solario. We had a witness here earlier this morning, and unfortunately she had to leave. I'm sure some of you have heard of Jeannie Woodford. She was the warden at a couple prisons, primarily at San Quentin, and she also was the acting director for just a short bit of time. She did prepare a statement, so my coworker here, Cece Gant, who's an academic teacher, is going to read her comments to the committee. Thank you.
Chairman Amiano, members of the committee, with your permission, I'd like to read the prepared statement by Jeannie Woodford. Good morning. I'm sorry. I'm an academic instructor with the Department of Corrections. Good afternoon, Chairman Amiano and members of the committee. It's an honor to be here today in support of AB 1239. I've spent nearly 28 years working for the California Department of Corrections, including 5 years as the warden of San Quentin State Prison until being appointed as the director of CDC in 2004. I was part of the team that added rehabilitation to the name of the CDC. I left the CDCR in 2006 to become the chief of probation for the city and county of San Francisco. I retired in 2008. I have 30 years working in the field of corrections. It is because of my experience that I'm here today in support AB 1239. I know firsthand the benefits of education and other rehabilitation programs to public safety. I have met thousands of prisoners whose lives have been changed because of education. Education not only allows an individual a greater opportunity for success in employment upon release, it also changes the way individuals think. I have witnessed individuals become a better person, a better spouse, a better parent, and a better citizen because of what they have learned in the classrooms of our state prisons. You do not have to rely on my personal observations. There is so much research on this topic. The higher the education levels, the lower the recidivism rates. The Washington Public Policy Institute has published studies on the effectiveness of prison and community corrections programs for offenders. Their studies show that education and vocational programs achieve significant reductions in recidivism. Study after study has proven the benefits of prison education and rehabilitative programs, and there is a bank of evidence-based programs for states to follow. Yet California, with the highest recidivism rate in the nation, has the lowest number of inmates participating in education and other rehabilitative programs. In a report by Joan Petersilla, completed prior to the prison cuts, Ms. Petersilla stated, "When it comes to educational and vocational skills, the needs of California's prisoners are no more acute than the rest of the nation, but California does not address those needs as effectively as some other states." In the same report, Ms. Petersilla documented the fact that 50.7% of California inmates do not have the opportunity to participate in substance abuse treatment, education, or vocational programs, compared to New York with 13.9% and Texas with 30.1% of the inmates not able to participate in rehabilitative programs. Nationally, the average is 30.2% of inmates who are unable to participate in evidence-based programs. Is it any wonder that California has the highest recidivism rate in the country? The current plan of the CDCR is to do significantly more with less isn't evidence-based. It is an experiment at a time when our resources are so limited. The cuts in vocational programs alone leave inmates without prospects for employment upon release. The plan fails to recognize the work teachers do to link inmates with resources upon release.
Be rude, but if you could conclude, we do have a recommend support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When we think of public safety, we often think of those professionals with a badge, and of course people with badges are important. But when I think of public safety, I do not only think of badges. I also think of drug counselors and our education and vocational instructors. Teachers change lives. Teachers are a valuable member of our public safety community, both inside and outside of our prison. Teachers are critical to preventing crime and lowering California's recidivism rate. In closing, I would ask you to support AB 1239. By doing so, you are making an investment that will reduce the cost of corrections. You are also affirming the state of California's commitment to operate evidence-based programs. Our tax dollars are precious and should only be spent on those programs that have been proven themselves to work. It is time to recognize and value education and the teachers of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation for their contributions to public safety. If we want to bring down the cost of corrections, we must follow the leads of states like New York, where they have expanded programs for inmates in the last decade and are now experiencing lower crime rates and are in fact closing prisons. I hope this body will act to save rehabilitative programs and improve the lives of all Californians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please. If we could be brief and to the point, we have to be out of the room by a fixed time.
Gotcha, Chief. I'm Chris Brady. I'm a teacher at San Quentin State Prison. I was kicked out of high school. I was expelled from Continuation High School, and I went back to school at age 35 to Brooklyn College, where I had great teachers. I got a Phi Beta Kappa. I got this little honor pin for a night school because I was working as a carpenter and going to school at nights and weekends. And now I have 2 master's degrees. One is in history and the other is in education. I'm trying to figure out why some people don't make it through school and end up in prison. And I've been teaching at San Quentin for 5 years. I want to make, did you all get a copy of Brian Fisher's letter to the editor of the New York Times?
Yes, New Jersey, the great state of New Jersey.
What's the first of the Fisher factors that he mentions as being most effective for reducing recidivism. It's education. And as I told Tom Elias of the California Focus Report, if you want to get rid of what's working in the prison system as far as reducing recidivism is concerned, it's like blowing your brains out, okay? One of the things you have to do is realize that when you get rid of the teachers who have taken years to put into the prison system, who have gone through in-service training on blood-borne pathogens, sexual harassment, et cetera, your volunteers and teachers' assistants can't do that. It's going to be a lot easier for you to break those prison teachers than it is to make new ones. Okay, please.
Thank you. Next speaker. Any other witnesses in support?
Ignacio Hernandez on behalf of the California Attorneys for Criminal Justice and the California Public Defenders Association in support.
Other speakers in support?
An academic teacher, SEIU member, in support. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Dr. Michelle Cole, PhD, educational professor, K-12 education over 40 years. I'm currently an educational teacher at Sierra Conservation Center in Jamestown. I strongly support this measure.
Next speaker.
Hello, thank you. I have in my hand, my name is Brenda Toski, academic teacher at Central California Women's Facility in a classroom where students really read below 4.0 level. In my hand, I have evidence of graduation, GED, AA, and high school.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Ann Graves, I'm a teacher at Corcoran, and I support it strongly.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Dr. Louise Draxler, academic teacher, California Substance Abuse Treatment Facility. I'm in support of this.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Grace Ramirez from Corcoran, and I support this bill.
Thank you.
My name's Gilbert Castellan, and I've been with the corrections for nearly 20 years. I started as a vocational drafting teacher, and I taught mechanical and architectural and computer-aided drafting. My program was closed in 2004.
Thank you.
I'm in support for it.
Thank you.
Sarah Gabriel, academic instructor. I support.
Thank you.
Danny Red, pre-release teacher, VSPW in Chowchilla. One of the main things we do in pre-release is breaking barriers. And in that activity, one of the activities in there, we have a pat on the back.
Okay.
Here's my pat on the back for my girls from many classes. Plus, here's one of our surveys that we have at the end of the class. Might be the last class. So
thank you. Pat on the back to you. Next speaker.
There you go. Where does this go to? I want to pass it in.
All right. Thank you very much. Ma'am.
Pearl Mitchell, bridging teacher, San Quentin. I support, especially in the reception, where over 35% of the GEDs that were attained at San Quentin came from the reception center, and I fully support this.
Thank you very much for your good work. Next speaker, please. Please stick to your identification position and.
Bernie Ghilardi, Valley State Prison for Women, and in support of the bill. Thank you.
Step right up.
Carrie Johnen, ESL teacher at Neil Creek State Prison until January 31st, and then I won't be. I am totally in support of this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bobby Clifton, academic teacher, Pelican Bay State Prison, and I do walk the toughest beat in the state.
Thank you.
Paul Dinger, I'm a teacher at Mule Creek State Prison, and I support this.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers in support? Any speakers in opposition? All right, seeing none, Mr. Solario, would you like to close? We do have a support.
I ask for your aye vote.
All right. All right, do I have a motion and a second already? I need a motion. Okay, roll call, please.
Amiano?
Aye.
Amiano, aye. Hagman? Aye. Hagman, aye. Furtani? Furtani, aye. Gilmore? Aye. Gilmore, aye. Hill? Aye. Hill, aye. Huffman? Skinner? Aye. Skinner, aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Portantino.
Thank you,
Item
Mr.
number 5.
Chair and members.
Okay, could you please take conversations outside? Thank you.
I am presenting AB 558, a reintroduction of AB 1017, a bill that I introduced to ensure that California does everything it can to find and convict rapists through the timely processing of rape kit evidence. In 2008, it was discovered that the city and county of Los Angeles had over 10,000 unopened rape kits in their evidence lockers. Of these, the city of Los Angeles alone had 403 unopened rape kits that were the result of stranger rapes. It is naive to believe that Los Angeles is the only community that is not testing its rape kits. AB 558 will require law enforcement agencies to report to the Department of Justice their statistics on the number of rape kits that they collect and test, and the number of these tests that are stranger rapes or where the identity of an assailant is contested.
I'll move the bill.
Thank you. I was going to point out that actually every member of this committee voted for this bill, and it came back on Senate concurrent 78-0. So I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Any other speakers in support, briefly?
Tammy Strobel with the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, in strong support. Thank you.
All right, any other speakers in support? Any in opposition? Support? Come right up.
Tiffany Syar, Director at Human Rights Watch. We strongly support this bill.
All right, thank you. Any speakers in opposition? Seeing none. Ms. Skinner, remarks?
Obviously, this bill was supported by the committee in the past and also by the whole House. But I just wanted to thank you for bringing it back, because there have been new reports on just the number of rape tests that exist in our different law enforcement agencies that have not gone through the full testing. And we've got such advances in DNA now, and we've seen where individuals who are either already incarcerated or who get under arrest, that we can then solve some of these cases. And it's just a horrible shame to have such evidence on hand and it not being, us not utilizing it. So I really appreciate you bringing it back.
It's all good, as someone I know likes to say.
Life is good.
Life is good.
And New Jersey made it a mention before, too.
We have a caucus here. All right, if no other comments, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Amiano?
Aye.
Amiano, aye. Hagman? Aye. Hagman, aye. Furtani? Aye. Furtani, aye. Gilmore? Aye. Gilmore, aye. Hill? Aye. Hill, aye. Huffman? Skinner? Aye. Skinner, aye. Those out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members.
Thank you so much, sir. All right. Our next agenda item is for vote only. Oh, my own bill. How could I be so negligent? You see, I'm so not self-absorbed. Yes, we do. Okay. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we've heard this in our committee before, right?
Yes, this is the AB 633 now, a measure to amend the Sexual Abuse in Detention Elimination Act. And my bill simply would add sexual orientation and gender identity to the current list of factors that should be considered when classifying housing prisoners.
I'll move the bill.
Thank you.
It's moved and seconded.
All right. And in support, Mr. Gray?
Matt Gray on behalf of Taxpayers for Improving Public Safety and support.
All right.
Tammy Strobel with the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, in strong support. Thank you.
Jenny Reichen with Equality California, the sponsor of this bill, and we thank Assembly Member for his leadership and urgent aye vote. Thank you.
Any opposition? It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Would you like to close, Mr. Chair? Or?
Just request an aye vote. Thank you.
Amiano?
Aye.
Amiano, aye. Hagman?
Aye.
Hagman, aye. Furtani? Furtani, aye. Gilmore? Gilmore, aye. Hill? Hill, aye. Huffman? Skinner? Skinner, aye.
Bill's out.
Thank you very much.
Actually voted on.
All right, the final agenda item is for vote only, and then we'll have to lift calls. For vote only, these have been heard before, and there'll be no testimony, as that was dealt with previously. First one for vote only is AB 357, Mr. Knight.
I'll move the bill, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and I recommend a no. So should we take these individually? We need a second? Okay. We got our second? All right.
Yes, we did.
All right, on 357?
Amiano?
No.
Amiano, no. Hagman?
Aye.
Hagman, aye. Furtani? Furtani, no. Gilmore? Gilmore not voting. Hill? No. Hill, no. Huffman? Skinner? No. Skinner, no.
All right.
It fails 1, 2, 4, and it will be.
All right, and now we have
You
it.
wanna make that announcement?
Yes, it failed, and will we return to where?
The chief clerks.
The chief clerks. Good place for it to be. AB 614, Miller, driving under the influence, refusal to submit to chemical tests. Chair recommends a no.
Mr. Chairman, did you hear anything from the presenter of this bill at all? I believe that we were told
No.
that he was going to pull off.
Oh, we didn't hear anything.
No, we didn't
Okay,
hear.
but we'll guess we'll go through the motion anyway.
All right.
I need
Also move.
Amiano?
No.
Amiano, no. Hagman?
Aye.
Hagman, aye. Furtani? Furtani, no. Gilmore? Gilmore, aye. Hill? Hill, no. Huffman? Skinner? Skinner, no. That bill fails, and it will be returned to chief clerk.
All right, bill fails. Return to chief clerk. Next is AB 1133, Mr. Nello. Gifts for voting. Chair recommends a no.
I have a motion from
Motion from Mr. Hagman, second from Mr. Gilmore. Roll call, please.
Amiano?
No.
Amiano, no. Hagman?
Aye.
Hagman, aye. Furtani? No. Furtani, no. Gilmore? Aye. Gilmore, aye. Hill? No. Hill, no. Huffman? Skinner? No. Skinner, no. That bill fails. And
All right, that will be returned to the chair, to the clerk. AB 1275, Anderson, vehicles driving under the influence, undocumented drivers. Chair recommends a no.
I'll move.
Amiano?
No.
Amiano, no. Hagman?
Aye.
Hagman, aye. Furtani? No. Furtani, no. Gilmore? Aye. Gilmore, aye. Hill? No. Hill, no. Huffman? Skinner? No. Skinner, no. That bill fails.
All right, the bill fails. Back to the clerk. And finally, SB 399, Yee, sentencing. Chair recommends an aye.
Amiano?
Aye.
Amiano, aye. Hagman?
No.
Hagman, no. Furtani? Aye. Furtani, aye. Gilmore? No. Gilmore, no. Hill? Aye. Hill, aye. Huffman? Skinner? Skinner, aye. That bill is out.
All right, the bill is out. And now we have what on call?
Anything in blue?
Okay. Let's see, on call, AB 984, Nava.
Call the absentees.
Hmm?
Call the absentees.
The absentees are Mr. Huffman
Hill?
and Hill.
Excuse me? No. Hill, no. Huffman? Skinner?
She didn't go up.
Not voting. Skinner, not voting.
Okay, on 984.
Furtani, not voting to aye. That bill is out.
All right, the bill is out. 984, you were no, I thought you did go up, I'm sorry. Okay.
984, Skinner, no. It's out, though.
It's out, like me. Okay.
Item number 12.
Item number 12, AB 1244, block.
Call the absentees.
Absentees.
Furutani. Furutani, aye. Gilmore. Gilmore, aye. Huffman. Skinner. Item number 12.
Mr. Blocks. Aye.
Oh, excuse me. Skinner, aye. We are adjourned.
We are going to keep it open for Mr. Huffman. He's on his way down.
See,
All
and
right.
we can also do add-ons, and they've moved the Veterans Affairs, so we can stay here for this moment.
Okay. We have any add-ons? We're fine. We're just waiting for Mr. Huffman. There you go.
See you back channel.
Yeah, thank you so much, all of you. I appreciate it. It's quite a day, huh? Yeah. Mr. Huffman? Yeah, happy to. Please approach the bench. Now, Mr. Huffman, it's been brought to my attention.
Would you like to be added to the consent calendar? Please. All right, starting with 1, you're on. What would you like to do with item number 2? That bill is out. Item 3, that bill is out. Item 4, the bill is out. No.
Yeah.
Yes. Item 5 is out. Item 6 was pulled. Item 7 is out. Item 8 is out. Ms. Skinner, would you like to be added to item number 8? Ms. Solis?
The veterans. It's the veterans.
How about item number 9?
Thank you.
That bill is out. Okay. Item 11, 10 was on consent.
Yes, and someday we
12. 13 was on consent. 14 was on consent. 15 failed. 15 no. 16 also failed. 17 also failed. 18 also failed. 19 is out. Not voting. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The meeting is adjourned.